Hi there, I'm Steve the Bread Guy, and today I want to show you how to make this. This is a lovely brown loaf that's made of crunchy stuff. It includes flaxseed, red rice, sesame seeds, and for a little bit of sweetness, some raisins. So this is a kind of juiced up raisin bread. Really, really healthy for you, and it tastes so good. And it rises really nicely, as you can see with this baguette that we'll make out of it as well. And that's what it looks like inside. Lots of nice crunchy stuff. Tastes great too. So, if you're interested, stick around and I'll show you how to do it step by step. So how do we start one of these? Well, it all starts with a bowl and some yeast. And I'm going to do something a little bit different this time. Usually I put in 2 teaspoons of yeast. This is instant dry active yeast. Usually I put in 2, but I get a lot of emails from you guys from all over the world, and one of you emailed, and I'm sorry I don't know your real name because everybody's got those funny email names. One of you emailed though and said, why are you putting in 2 teaspoons of yeast? Why don't you just put in 1 and let it sit longer? That way the flour will have a chance to be more flavorful. So I thought, okay, why don't I give it a try? And you know what? This person was absolutely right. For a whole wheat bread, this really does bring out the flour of the whole wheat flour and all the other stuff I'm going to put into it. So this particular bread is a little different than what I usually do. I'm going to start this one at night and let it rise all night. And I'm only going to put in 1 teaspoon of yeast rather than 2. So it's going to need more time to rise, but it's going to rise just as well as it does with 2. It's just going to take a lot longer. So 2 cups of warm water, just warm enough so that this is actually lukewarm water. Usually I put in hotter water, but for this one, because it's going to be on the go for so long, the water is going to cool down anyway. So lukewarm is just fine. So I've dumped that in, and it's going to take about 10 minutes or so for the yeast to activate and start getting scummy on top. Don't do a thing until you see it getting scummy on top, and I'll show you what that looks like. So we're going to leave that for 10 minutes. In the meantime though, I want to just tell you about the ingredients you're going to need for this. So I'm just going to put that to the side for the moment. I'll just give it a little bit of a stir. So the ingredients we'll need: salt as usual, white flour, some whole wheat flour. It can be whole grain or just regular stuff that you buy from the grocery store. If you do use whole grain, whole wheat, just keep in mind that that's a heavier wheat than the stuff you usually buy at the grocery store, and it also sucks up more liquid, so you'll have to leave the dough a little wetter when we come to the dough ball stage. In any case, one kind of whole wheat or another. And then to give this its really yummy crunchy flavor on the inside, I'm going to add about 1/4 cup of the following things: 1/4 cup of raisins, and actually I'll just put these in right now. So 1/4 cup of raisins. I'm using Thompson raisins, whatever you like. And then 1/4 cup of other crunchy things. Now, you don't have to use exactly the same crunchy things as I'm using, but what you want is something which isn't actually going to be completely digested by the bread, like completely made mushy by the bread. So a few things work. This is red rice. You could also use whole grain rice. I imagine even a basmati rice would work, but the nice thing about this is you can see it. It's going to stand out against the color of the bread. So about 1/4 cup of that. As well as, this is flaxseed. Flaxseed is very good for you apparently. It has all sorts of nutritional benefits. It also, the baking won't change this. It's not gonna become soft at all. So it'll stay intact in the bread, so you'll be able to see it, and you'll be able to feel it as you crunch on it, which is great. So put 1/4 cup of those. And then I'm going to put in 1/4 cup of sesame seeds. Another thing you can use are wheat berries. Wheat berries are really good for this too because they're very, very crunchy, and you can get them in health food stores. So, and about 1/4 cup of those. Okay. So, we're going to dump that in there once this gets scummy, but no action yet, but that's not surprising. It's going to take 10 or 15 minutes before anything happens. So, I'm going to let this be, and I will see you in a little bit. Okay, so it's been 10 minutes, and as you can see, the yeast is activated. It's alive. So now it's time to give it a couple more ingredients to deal with. First of all, I'm going to add 2 teaspoons of salt. The salt's just for taste. It's nothing that the bread needs to rise, but it'll taste a little bland without it. So 2 teaspoons of salt, and then we get to the flour. So for the flour, what I would suggest is do 2 cups of white flour, which will give it a nice rise. You could do this all with whole wheat, but I just find that the breads come out very dense and kind of heavy, and I just don't like them as much. So put in 2 cups of white flour, give it a good stir, and then I won't put any more white flour in except for my hands and stuff, and later on for the counter when I roll it out. Okay, so 2 cups of white flour in there, and now I'm going to add about a cup of the brown flour, the whole wheat flour. Okay, there we go. So you may wonder, so what is the difference between white and brown? I mean, is it just color? It's not just color, actually. There's 3 parts to the wheat berry, which is what flour is made of, white flour, or rather, wheat flour is made out of wheat berries, no big surprise there. And there's actually three layers on a wheat berry, and 2 of those layers are taken off to make white flour. It just has the central layer. Whereas the wheat germ and the wheat germ and the bran rather is kept for the whole wheat as well as the endosperm. So that's why whole wheat flour is heavier, because it's got all 3 parts of the wheat berry in it. Whereas white flour is much lighter and more elastic, and can be used in cakes and pastries, because it doesn't have the bran weighing it down, as well as the wheat germ. So, okay, so I put in a cup there, and now I'm going to add all of this stuff all at once, and we'll see how much more whole wheat flour we can add in once we've incorporated this. Give it a good stir so it gets nice and mixed in. There we go. One of the funny anecdotes about the history of bread is that up until around the year 1900, well, no, that's not quite true. Up until the 1850s or so, the vast majority of people ate brown bread pretty much exclusively because white bread was too expensive. The rich had always eaten white bread. It just takes more effort at the mill to take away those 2 layers. So it being more effort, it was more expensive, so only some people could afford it. So generally speaking, if you were rich, you wanted white bread, and if you were poor, you were stuck with brown bread. Well, in the 19th century, the Industrial Revolution revolutionized milling of flour as well, and they were able to create great big rollers which could crush the wheat berries, and made it easier to make white flour in large quantities. And for the first time, housewives, who did most of the baking at home at that time, were able to make white bread at home. Well, terrific, and they did. They just jumped at the chance to do this. White bread had been the preserve of the rich for so long that a chance to get what the rich had always had was a welcome opportunity. Well, the thing about those rollers that they were using was that it actually kind of crushed the wheat berries in a way that it made the flour not so white. I guess the way white flour had worked before they had the industrial rollers was that it took a few weeks for the color of the flour to gradually turn white. Whereas if you put it through these industrial rollers, it just turned out a kind of dingy color, and they were selling it that way, and people were going, well, this doesn't look like white flour. And so they started adding dyes to it. They started adding peroxide to it. And they also added like aluminum salts at one point. There were all sorts of different things added to it so that they could make it seem more white. And so that's when the great tradition of boulderizing and doctoring our flour came into be. They said that it was going to be more convenient to have industrial mills, and then they had to start changing the stuff so that we could, would get the stuff which we had before. Because stone ground mills could create white flour, just never in the quantities which the industrial mills could do. The other thing that happened was that milling process with the big wheels, big rollers really, it also imparted a kind of slightly bitter taste to the flour. So what do you think they added to the flour to cover that? You guess it, they started adding sugar. So by the year 1900, people had stopped buying brown flour in much quantities in preference for the new white because of that historical tendency of the rich to eat white. So now everybody wanted to eat white, and white is a fluffier bread, no question, particularly with the kind of yeast they were using back then. But to do that, they ended up having to add sugar and dyes to the flour, which they'd never had to do before. And apparently that contributed to the reason that's considered one of the reasons why sugar has increased in our diet. If you look at recipes from the mid 1850s of things like cookies and so forth, they didn't have as much sugar as they have now. It's because the actual flour that we were using got more and more sugar into it at that time that it sort of primed our taste buds, at least in North America, for sweeter and sweeter things. Okay, so a little history lesson, but now we have a nice dough ball. So I'm just going to scrape this out. Put a little bit of oil in it, and then I'm going to put the dough ball in there, and I'm going to leave it all night long. So, okay, let me get rid of this. And just put a little bit of oil in here. About a tablespoon. It's just regular vegetable oil. A whisk. And in she goes. Alright, and just put a towel over top. And we're done. Okay, well, good night, bread. Good night, everybody. I will see you tomorrow morning. So good morning. It's the next day. It's around 8:30 in the morning, and let's see how our bread did. Oh, it rose nicely. See that? So it really filled the bowl. So that 1 teaspoon of yeast has been doing a lot of work all night long. It's been eating and tooting its way through, creating lots and lots of carbon dioxide bubbles. So now we're going to punch that down, and we're going to roll it out and create a couple of baguettes. Or at least I'll probably do 1 baguette and 1 round bread. So let's punch it down. Oh yeah, you can hear the gas escaping. That's great. Pull it out. It's got a nice smell to it too. You can smell the raisins and a little bit of the yeast. So just do this a little bit. If you ever wondered, the reason we do this is that flour contains a protein called gluten. And that's actually what makes wheat flour special, is the gluten allows the bread to keep a structure. Other flours that you make, say flours out of things like rice or even barley, they don't have much, if any, gluten. And as a result, if you make breads out of them, they fall flat. They don't rise and stay risen because they don't have any gluten to hold them up. Whereas wheat flour has this special property called gluten. Okay, so I'm going to divide this into 2 pieces. Oh, there we go. Okay, 2 pieces. One there. Another here. Actually, that's silly. Put that and that there. So what I want to do first is I'm going to roll out a baguette. The nice thing about this flour, or rather this bread, is that because it's got the whole wheat in it, it's not terribly elastic. Now that may seem like a bad thing, but the reality is that if it's really elastic, like say a white bread would be, what'll happen is if you make a baguette out of it, the baguette won't keep its shape if you just leave it on a pan because it's so elastic. It'll just keep rising and rising and expanding and get all flat. Whereas this stuff I found doesn't do that. It keeps its shape, which is nice because eating this in a baguette form is very nice for you know, just having a small piece with dinner or cutting it up for sandwiches. So I'm just going to roll this out. Just roll it away from yourself first. Oops, I'm gonna knock that over. Roll it away from yourself. So it's lengthwise like that, and then turn it sideways like this. And the same thing. What you want to do is roll out something that looks like a rectangle. If it's a rectangle, then it'll roll up nicely without too many weird things on the end. So that's a reasonable rectangle. Get a little bit thinner. Try and make it maybe 3 times as wide, about, I was going to say 3 times as wide as the rice in it, but you just want to get it nice and flat. I'm going to lift this so you can see how thin it is, okay? So it's about 1.5 times as thick as one of the raisins in it. So now what you do is take the shortest end, like if this is longer and this is shorter, roll from here, and just simply roll it up. And don't worry about the white flour on it. That'll actually kind of make it look cool in the end. Just roll it up like that. Pull it back. The seam where it ends, I just put it underneath. And then here, on the ends where it's sticking out, where you can see the fold line. See there, you can see the fold line, right? So just gently stretch it over that end and tuck it under. And then squeeze the whole thing so it gets a little bit longer. Like that. Now if there are any raisins sticking out on the top, just take them off gently, because they'll burn, and you don't want that. So I've got a couple sticking out here. There you go. And then I would give it one last roll in the flour. The reason I do this is that it's actually the uneven distribution of the white flour, which gives it a nice look at the end. So just one roll. There we go. Okay. So now I just need a pan. One moment, please. Okay, so I'm just going to put this into an oiled pan. Like that, so just put the oil lengthwise, then lift this gently, put it there, and then stick a towel on top of it. We're going to let that rise for an hour. Now, while that's doing that, I'm going to do another one here. This one I'm just going to leave brown, so I'm just going to knead it a little bit, give it one roll in the flour, pull off the raisins, and then leave it. I'll put this on a different pan. Okay, and this tastes really, really good. You'll be so pleased with this because it's got a nice crunch. Look at all the stuff that's in it, right? There's seeds, there's the flax seeds and the red rice. The red rice is not dissolved or become mushy. There's the raisins, of course, to give it a bit of sweetness. This is a very yummy bread. So I'm going to give it one roll in the flour. There we go. And put it on a pan. Where's my oil? There it is. Put it on there. And I will put a towel over that too. I tend to wash my hands, then dry my hands with the towel, so the towel will be moist, which helps. So we'll leave these for about an hour, and then we'll put the oven at 400 degrees, and we'll cook them for about half an hour, and that should be enough. So there we go. That's all there is to it. I will see you in an hour. Okay, so it's been about an hour, so let's see how everything turned out. Okay, nicely risen, so that's ready for the oven. And let's see how the baguette turned out. Oh yeah, the baguette's obviously bigger, right? See that? Very, very nice. Very nice. Now I'm just going to put a couple of slashes in the baguette, which will also give it a nice look. So I'm just going to put some water on this serrated knife. Now the key to doing this is to do it really, really quickly. So just 1, 2, 3. There we go. So a couple of small slashes there. I'm just going to give them just a couple of seconds to expand. During that time, I'm going to put this into the oven. Oh, the oven is set at 400, by the way, and I put a bowl of water in there to steam it up, because that helps give a really nice crust. Okay, so that's one in, and these are now expanding, which is nice. Let's give it another couple seconds. So this will bake for 30 minutes. That'll look really good and taste fantastic afterwards. So, in it goes. Set the timer to 30 minutes and walk away. See you in a little bit. Okay, so it's been about 35 minutes since I put the bread in. It looked like it could use a little more time, so it needed to brown a little bit more. So now let's take a look and see how they turned out. Here's the round bread, which obviously kept its shape and got nice and brown. Nice hollow sound in there. That's going to taste great. And let's see the baguette. And here's the baguette. A little bit of discoloration from those raisins, but that's something which sometimes happens, sometimes doesn't. But you can hear the hollow sound. It's definitely done. Smells really, really good. You can see the there's all sorts of flax seeds and stuff showing up at the surface, which looks terrific and tastes really good too. Let me get a knife and let's just take a slice here. You can hear the crunchiness of it, eh? There we go. So that's what it looks like on the inside. Really, really nice. Lots of flax seeds and the red rice you can still see. Smells really good too. This has a really nice thick crust, but on the inside you can see it's nice and spongy. So, and it's got these crunchy bits. So you sort of get this really nice combination of crunch and soft and crunch, both inside and outside. So I'm Steve the Bread Guy. Give this a go and let me know how it turns out. Bye for now.